Buenas tardes.
Ok,
Hi. Hi,
ahí
everyone.
estamos ya. Oscar, ¿cómo estás? Buenas tardes.
Muy bien.
No sé en qué idioma estás, no sé si nos escuchas. Creo que tienes que ponerte en canal español, en canal inglés,
¿Cómo le hago?
abajo en el interpretation icon.
Así está bien, así se me escucha ya en inglés.
Sí, excelente. ¿Y ya tienes mute your original audio para que no escuches la traducción al momento que empiece? ¿Sí? Ah, ahí estás en español. Ahí te me moviste a español o te pusiste en mute.
Me puse en mute.
No, en el interpretation icon, ahí debes de seleccionar mute original audio. ¿Dónde está el link, Sam?
Era lo que le iba a decir. Es que le das en el botoncito, en el globito, y le pones inglés o español, el que quieras, y abajito donde dice inglés y español viene mute original audio, silenciar el audio original.
A ver ahí.
Sí, te escuchamos bien. Sí, te escuchamos bien.
Sí. Nomás asegúrate, Oscar, que en tu iconito de abajo, donde dice interpretación,
Ajá.
selecciones el mute original audio.
Ya.
Ok,
Listo, ya estás.
ok. ¿El link de YouTube ya está compartido?
Ya estamos. We're live.
Jesús, do you have the link in the website?
Just got it. Let me put it on the site.
Jesus, I think you're somewhere. Either
Yeah,
you go to the English channel.
Yeah, he's there. He's just muted.
Let me go here.
¿Qué hacemos, Sam?
¿Listo? No, ya es hora. Let's start.
Los empezamos a admitir y esperamos 3 minutos,
Sí,
4 minutos.
ya let's. Sí.
Okay.
Okay, so here we go. We're just gonna wait another 2 or 3 minutes before we start. But
We're going to start admitting people now.
so welcome everyone. Bienvenidos a todos. So we're gonna wait for 2 or 3 more minutes while we let all the people join. Vamos a esperar unos 2 o 3 minutos en lo que dejamos a toda la gente entrar. Hola Maru. Saúl acaba de poner en el chat las instrucciones para conectarse en inglés y en español.
Bill, would you mind sharing your screen or, yeah, just with the first slide with the instructions so people can see that when they're getting in?
Yep.
Thank you.
Nuevamente, Everyone who joins, please make sure to select your favorite language or your preferred language. It can be English. Bill, could you, yeah, there. And then make sure to select your language and put mute original audio para aquellos que van entrando, y quieran revisar cuál es el idioma en el que quieren seleccionar. Por favor, seleccionen en el iconito de abajo, en el globito, su idioma, en este caso español, y silenciar el audio original. Con eso podrán ustedes irse al canal de español. If you prefer to listen this in English, please select your audio and mute your original audio. Gracias, thank you. Okay, vamos a
For
esperar un par
those
de
that
minutos.
just have signed in, please make sure you go to the bottom of your screen, select the interpretation icon, and choose the language of your preference. Make sure you also select mute your original audio. That way you will only hear the language of your preference. The instructions are in the screen for those who are just signing in.
Hola, Stephanie. Hi, Stephanie. So, either way, if you want to listen in English, and so you might be able to be jumping from English to Spanish. If you want to listen the original audio, you will have to be jumping from the English channel to the Spanish channel, and you will be able to listen in the original audio. Otherwise, if you have a one preference, please select English.
Aquí lo podemos cambiar el idioma.
Sí,
We're gonna wait
sí, ahí
just
abajo.
one more minute.
Bienvenidos a todos. Welcome everyone.
Sam, are you in the English channel now?
Now I'm in the English channel. I was on the original audio as everyone was coming.
Okay.
I was in the original audio.
Oh,
Then-
okay. That's why I couldn't hear you.
Sí.
All right. So I guess we're gonna start, if that's okay with everyone. Bill and the team, are you okay with starting? Okay. We are 5 minutes after 4, and we have a lot of things to do. So let's start. We'll keep giving the instructions on the chat for people that are just signing in. So welcome everyone to the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters. This is our coffee break series event. And today is going to be hosted by the University of Texas in El Paso, as well with the University of Ciudad Juárez, Universidad Autónoma Ciudad Juárez in Mexico. So we're very glad to have them here. Please, reminded of the instructions. If you want to hear the event in English, please go down to your interpretation icon, select English, and make sure you want to unmute your original audio. That's going to be your language of your preference. Also, we want to share with the audience that if you have an event, if you have an effort, a cooperation effort as the one that we're going to present today, and you need some support and you want to share it with the forums network, please contact us. We're going to have that information on the chat in a bit, so you have the availability to use the forum. The forum is yours. It's a community forum, so let's use it for this and other cooperation efforts. And with that, I'm going to introduce, the topic of today. The topic of today, I'm going to read it and you have it in your screen. Overcoming divided governance. Can we improve the management of transboundary groundwater through binational cooperation? And it's going to be hosted, as I said, by UTEP and Universidad Autónoma de Ciudad Juárez. Our moderator today is Bill Hargrove. As he said, he's semi-retired. He's the former director of Center for Environmental Resources Management at University of Texas, El Paso. His research interest in sustainable management of water resources, sustainable agriculture, soil and water conservation. He's principal investigator for the USDA-funded research project on sustainable water resources for the El Paso Norte region. And with that, Bill, we're gonna give you the floor so you can present your results, your research results today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rosario, and thank you to Rosario and Sam for allowing us to present today. We're going to start with a presentation of some results on the Hueco Bolson, the aquifer that is shared between Texas and Chihuahua. The research that we're going to share with you is from a USDA funded research project that UTEP was the lead, but Huasejota in Juarez was also a full partner in our project. So we're going to present some results and also some results of an activity that we held in the winter, a workshop. And then we're going to ask 4 experts, an expert panel, to respond to what we present, and we'll have some time, hopefully, also for some questions and discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce the 2 speakers who will be presenting the research results from our project. They are Dr. Alex Mayer, who is at UTEP. He's a professor of civil engineering and now the director of the Center for Environmental Resource Management, CERM, at UTEP. And his research is primarily focuses on sustainable management of water resources, especially in response to climate and competing demands for water. And then the second half of the presentation, I'm going to go ahead and introduce both speakers now, and they'll switch in the middle. But the other presenter is Dr. Alfredo Granados Olivas from Huasejota and Juarez. And he's a professor of civil and environmental engineering at the Institute of Engineering and Technology at Huasejota. And his research is also focused on sustainability of water resources, especially groundwater. And he's very interested in transboundary development of agriculture. So I'm going to turn it over to them for their presentation. And then we'll ask the expert panel to give a brief response, and we'll have time for questions and discussion. So Dr. Alex Mayer.
Thank you, Bill, for the introduction. And thank you to Sam and Rosario for the opportunity to present our work in this exciting forum and such a welcoming community. It's truly an honor to be able to present in this binational forum. So our story today is about the Hueco Bolson aquifer, a transboundary aquifer in a semi-arid region that's already experiencing fierce competition for water, a growing population, and a hardening irrigation demand. And I don't need to tell anybody in this audience that the governance of the aquifer is complex, given that 2 countries share the aquifer, each with its own system of aquifer management or lack of management, and a limited history of cooperation between the US and Mexico on binational cooperation and groundwater management. The next slide, please. This is an outline of what we'll present today. Our working hypothesis is that binational cooperation on transboundary groundwater management is possible. And the first step towards this for the Hueco Bolson is to convene workshops based on what we're calling, and others call, a serious games concept, which we'll explain in some detail as we get through the presentation. And we're using these workshops to explore the current and future state of the workshop and binational options for extending the lifetime of the aquifer. So I'm going to present on the current situation and our projected future state of the aquifer. And then my colleague, Dr. Granados Olivas, will talk about the motivation, design, and results and key findings from our serious games exercises with regional stakeholders. So next slide, please. Next slide. So just for context, the work we're presenting today, as actually Bill's already mentioned, is part of a larger project in water security in the Paso del Norte region, where we've developed a series of water resources systems models and explore the future of regional water resources with stakeholders. And as Bill also has already mentioned, this project has involved multiple stakeholders from several universities and was funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture at the level of $5 million over the last 6 years. And that project was led by Dr. Hargrove, and I should also give credit to Dr. Josiah Hyman, who I believe is on the call today. So next slide, please. So our focus today is on the Hueco Bosan aquifer. Can you see my cursor? Which is located, which is located in the state of Texas in the United States, and is also located then in the state of Chihuahua in Mexico. And in Mexico, the aquifer is also known as the Valle de Juarez aquifer. We're also focusing on the primary users of the aquifer today, which are the cities of Ciudad Juarez on the Mexican side and the city of El Paso on the US side. But it's important to point out that water in the Paso del Norte region is highly interconnected, with other water users competing for water from the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo, and also the regional aquifers. So this is very much a conjunctive use situation, with the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo water continuously being used to its fullest extent, and the aquifers used for a baseline of demand, and then increased use during years when Rio Grande, Rio Bravo water availability is low. So next slide, please. So to start with the current situation, what we're showing with this slide are the sources of supply for the two cities, Ciudad Juarez and El Paso. And the units here are thousands of acre feet per year. And the charts show that the Hueco Bosan is a primary source of water for Ciudad Juarez, and that although El Paso has a more diverse portfolio of water supply sources, the Hueco Bosan is still the largest source of supply for El Paso. The charts also indicate the relative share of pumping from the Hueco Bosan, which is the slice of the pie in blue there. So approximately 64% of the pumping from the aquifer goes to Ciudad Juarez, about 28% to El Paso, and then other users, including smaller water utilities, agriculture, are using the remaining 7 to 8% or so. And note that while Ciudad Juarez today is the major user, up until the last few decades or so, El Paso was the major user, and there was more use for irrigated agriculture. So next slide, please. So these two slides show the Elephant Butte Reservoir, which is the major source of surface water for the region. And we see in the left-hand photo that the aerial picture of the reservoir, where it's close to full capacity in 1994. And then on the right-hand side, Bill, if you could click, I think that'll advance. On the right-hand side, and then one more time. Okay, on the right-hand side, we see a picture of the aquifer at less than 5% capacity. And I want to point out this picture is from September of last year. The aquifer is at about 10% capacity now. So we're back in the situation where we have very low levels, with expected deliveries to downstream users being very, very low this year. And the plot on the bottom right also shows the variability in Elephant Butte storage, and that the last decade, which is in the yellow box there, has been especially dry. So the purpose of that is to indicate the great degree of variability of surface water supply in the region. So next slide, please. For groundwater supplies, as a result of pumping from the Hueco Bosan greatly exceeding the recharge, groundwater elevations have declined close to a half a meter per year, or about 1.5 meters per year over the last 50 years or so. There's been somewhat of a less decline in the last couple decades as El Paso has reduced its pumping to some extent from the Hueco Bolson. Brackish groundwaters always existed in the Hueco Bolson as a result of ancient seas that formed during the last very wet period in the region, and then were buried. And so again, brackish waters always existed, but salinity is increasing in the freshwater supply on the order of tens of milligrams per liter per year as a result of pumping, reducing the freshwater storage and inducing lateral flow of brackish water into the freshwater portions of the aquifer. The next slide, please. So we use a very simple single compartment groundwater model to determine changes in freshwater storage with time, resulting in estimates of depletion of freshwater storage and the times when the freshwater will be completely depleted. And so very simply stated, the depletion rate is simply the difference between pumping and recharge. Recharge we estimate to be about 33,000 acre feet per year. That estimate has quite a bit of uncertainty, but we can see just about no matter what estimate you would choose, as I've said before, the recharge is greatly exceeded by the pumping. So we subtract those two numbers from each other and we have the depletion rate. And the other piece of the calculations that we need to calculate the depletion time for the freshwater in the Hueco Bolson is the volume of recoverable freshwater. This is also a somewhat uncertain number, but we're using a conservative estimate of the volume of freshwater remaining at 6.5 million acre feet. And then doing the division there, taking that volume and dividing by the depletion rate, we come up with a time to depletion of just a little bit more than four decades, given current pumping rates and our current estimates of recharge. Next slide, please. So now onto the future, onto our projected scenario for future conditions if the Hueco Bolson continues to be managed with business as usual. So these are the major assumptions between our business as usual modeling and calculations. We're using a time period of the next 50 years. We're estimating that pumping rates will increase by about 30% due to population increases in Ciudad Juarez and El Paso, and also because of greater reliance on the Hueco Bolson and El Paso due to declining availability of surface water from the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo. We're assuming that recharge will remain the same in the future, but in actuality, it's likely to decrease due to reduced river flows and continued lining of canals, which are the major sources of recharge for the Hueco Bolson. We're also not factoring into the demand that warmer temperatures will probably impact water demands from the cities and irrigators and rural residents. So that could increase the pumping rates even further than what we were estimating. We know that El Paso Water and the two utilities that operate water in El Paso and Juarez, El Paso Water and the Junta Municipal de Agua and Saneamiento in Juarez, do plan to implement some measures to reduce reliance on the Hueco Bolson, but we needed to have a base for estimating, comparing the future to today. And so we don't factor those potential reductions in demand at this point. And next slide, please. So a bit of follow-up now on climate change impacts. What you see in the top plots are the results from our modeling of 50-year projections of surface water availability from Elephant Butte Reservoir, going from the left with a very dry projected scenario to the right on a very wet projected scenario. And then in the middle, there's a dry scenario, which we think is probably the most likely to occur, or gives us an idea what we think is likely to occur in the future. And so in those top plots, what's important to focus on is the red lines. The red dashed line shows what a full allocation would be for downstream users. And then the red dashed line shows us what the allocations will be as a result of these climate change projections. And you can see that for the very dry, pessimistic scenario, the allocations are always on the order of about half of the full allocation. But for the somewhat more optimistic but likely dry scenario in the middle, the allocations are almost always substantially below full allocation. So it's a pretty bleak and dry future, we think, for surface water supplies. The plots on the bottom show corresponding declines in storage in the Waco Bolson. And if you focus on the red line, that shows the rate of depletion from storage for each of those three scenarios. And these declines in storage are driven by continued baseline pumping for the water users in the Waco Bolson, the two cities, and then the scattered other users, but also increased pumping due to reduced surface water availability. So as we go from left to right, from very dry to wet, we see that the rate of decline in the Waco Bolson decreases. But again, for the likely scenario in the middle there, we have very substantial losses in storage expected as a result, again, of baseline demand staying, increasing, and then also more reliance on the Waco Bolson because of reduced surface water availability. The next slide, please. So now we're going to recalculate the depletion time based on our new pumping rate, which is again a 30% increase in pumping. Assuming that the recharge will remain the same, we come up with a depletion of a depletion rate now of a little bit more than 200,000 acre feet per year. Using the same volume of recoverable freshwater that we used in the prior estimates, we come up with a depletion time for the freshwater of just a few decades. And so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Alfredo Granados Olivas, who's going to tell you about how we implemented the serious games workshops and how we use these scenarios of the current situation and projections for the future in those serious games. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Alex, and thank you, Rosario and Sam, for organizing this and giving us the opportunity to show to our binational colleagues some of the interesting results that we had on this project. One of the most important things that we had on the project is that we had direct contact with stakeholders through all these years on the development on the project. And the final stage that was done last winter is how did we implement an hypothetical serious game to manage groundwater resources, inviting different agencies and different stakeholders. Bill, can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So the bottom line in here is that we had the idea or the main motivation on presenting this in a serious game process is that we could get into some kind of a crisis based on the availability on groundwater resources, which is the main resource for potable water in the region. So we also understood that we had a common pool resource. This is that we have a binational resource that is shared by both major cities on the watershed. So that was one of the most important assets that we had to show people that participated. So just to give you a little bit of a background, the serious game is a methodology that has been used to advance or to evaluate or to address the mitigation or risk associated with environmental natural resources. It's just a common methodology that is applied at different levels in different countries. So the exercises directly it has the main idea to directly engage participants in a realistic problem, but with hypothetical challenges in order to motivate them to learn the new materials that we had to address the approach on a sustainable management on the water source, on the water resource on the binational level. So those simulated decisions processes were we had some quality on position taking on a negotiation. That is, we had the opportunity to give the participants the idea in which they had control on decisions to manage the resources on a binational level. And this is very important because I had participants from both sides of the border, and that was very interesting to see what their opinions were. So we got engaged in this with these stakeholders to explore these binational solutions in regards to groundwater availability and depletion in the region. The next slide, please, Tim. So the workshop was designed based on 6 main sessions which were expanded through about 12 weeks under a Zoom environment. And we have this platform to use to participate, to invite the participants to collaborate with us. So main participants were basically from municipal and industrial sectors and the government. Those were the ones that were selected to participate in our proposal. So we had around 13 to 20 persons per session, and we had an average of single participants to have been involved in about 3.5 meetings out of these 6 meetings that we had from both sides of the US and Mexico. So the main focus or the main frame that we used is that the Hueco boson, and we explained the current situation as Alex did already explain to you some of the numbers. And we also had the proposal of addressing the problem with business as usual protocols. That is, we were just modeling as we had on the actual data that we had showed you based on what Alex has presented. And also we wanted to understand, or we wanted to show them, or we wanted to participate in how we can prolong or extend the life of this aquifer. So we also provided the focus that the main users of water were the main utilities, the principal water utilities in the region, which is the El Paso Water Utility and the Junta Municipal de Agua, although there were also some other considerations based on irrigation in agriculture. So we did present the models and some of the methodologies that we used to have these numbers and to estimate the depletion rates based on what the current situation or as business as usual situation, using as the best information that we had available or based on different studies that we were able to get on our hands. So we went through this model structure, and some assumptions were made, and also we did some projections through time and asked the participants about if they felt that the model were confident accordingly with what we were showing to them. The next slide, please. So the decisions were considered, and decisions were 4 main basic assumptions. And this were the questions or the basic frame that we explained to them. And the first one was how long should we extend the life of the fresh water available in the Hueco boson? So in this case, everyone agreed that we had to reduce the depletion rate that was happening accordingly with what we showed them. But we also asked them on the estimates on how much they think that that we should reduce the depletion, and how much should we push that number. So we also asked them by how much of that reduction on pumping should be by each one of both cities. So that means that how much pumping should be stopped from Juarez and how much from El Paso to reduce this depletion. So the numbers were, reduce pumping about 67%, and so in Ciudad Juarez, which is more than in El Paso. That is, Ciudad Juarez currently pumps more water than El Paso, accordingly what we already established on the presentation. And we also addressed if we should reduce pumping by equal amounts, like it will be like, for example, less impact for Juarez because we pump more water from the aquifer, or if you should equal percentages, and that will mean that we should, without what the Ciudad Juarez said, we have more impact on on the volume of water they were able to pump from the system. So we also addressed what measures can each city take to reduce pumping, and also we addressed on the issue on the cost of reducing pumping, and we had different approaches from each city. For example, Ciudad Juárez could address or attend the reduce of leaks that we had on the water distribution system, on the potable water distribution system in the city. Or, for example, El Paso could reduce the outside use of water, like in lawns and stuff like that. So different options for substituting this water from the aquifer on the Hueco Bolson was, like, for example, expand desalination on the case of El Paso. Obviously, Juárez just to start, or consider desal as an alternative. And also we gave them the option as the aquifer recharge and treated wastewater, to use treated wastewater as a potential recharge to the aquifer. Direct potable reuse, import water from other neighboring watersheds. That's another option that we put on their perspective, to incentivize conservation, water conservation, and to reduce leaks in the infrastructure. Finally, given that the Hueco Bolson is a binational system, is a mobile dynamic system, and that there's a single pool of water for both communities, and we decided, we gave them the alternative that action has to be taken between both sides. That means that if one side does something, it will affect the other, and vice versa. So the total of cost by each side of the communities will also address, and it could be also a percentage of reduction in each side of the watershed. So it will probably needed funding from different sources, like in Mexico City, or international sources like funding from other agencies. Thanks, Bill. So the implications and decisions: if we do nothing and force a sudden transition in around 2050, that would be a completely completely replace the pumping from the Hueco Bolson. That would be a very expensive process, and it will take 50%, for example, 50% desalination on imported water. Also, we could be approximately, it will approximately cost $74 million for El Paso to replace that 50% of the pumping, and more around 100 and 200 million pesos for Ciudad Juárez, accordingly with the calculations. So prolonging the life on a short time period, it will result in less expensive measurements, but by quicker introductions to costly alternative supplies and or domestic conservation measures. And to prolong the longer time, that will put in an expensive full transition. That would be that it will cost more to adjust to a sudden change in water disponibility or availability from different sources. Next slide. So this is some of the options that we put on their perspective. There were 7 options to consider in the game, so they can decide it. And roughly what we had in the graph, as you can see, there were costs associated with the different alternatives to reduce pumping. Like, for example, reduce each city's pumping by 15%. It will give us an span time of 37 years, and so on and so forth, on accordingly with the graph. So different alternatives were decided or were offered to them based on what they wanted to do to expand the life of the aquifer, which, as you can see, 73-year expanded on the aquifer. That means a reduction of pumping of 40,000 acre feet per year, and reduce 13% of the demand on the city. Next, please. Some of the most important results that we found is that no one treats business as usual, which is really, really interesting to see that nobody wants to keep doing the same management or the same procedures on how to use water, which is a general consensus in between both cities. That's really important. That means that stakeholders or participants were really aware of what the problem was in regards to availability of water resources and the challenge that we will have in the near future. So the range of proposed pumping reductions varied about 33% or up to 97%. So some people say that we should almost stop pumping from the aquifer, which would be very expensive to do. Obviously, and it's not a realistic option. So most common proposal was centered around 38% to reduce pumping to have an span of 50 years, which is not that, I mean, this is not a wide span of time to have fresh water in the aquifer, even though that they suggested that 38% reduction in pumping. So the range of reduction responsibility is as you can see on the numbers, but we had very few responses under this range of percentages. So discussions included both equal volume reduction, big impact, and El Paso. That means that if we go by the equal volume reduction, El Paso will have a bigger impact. And if we had a percentage reduction approximation, that will have a big impact in Ciudad Juárez, just basically because of the volume of water that has been pumped in both regions. The next slide. So the discussions in regards to the policies and measures that we were supposed to be taking or suggested to take it, taken as an approximation to conservation, where to incentivize conservation policies. That means that people had to have a benefit to reduce pumping or to save water in their own households. And also, the most expensive or the more expensive supplies were also considered, as you can see on the graph. So desalination for both cities is going to be very expensive. Outdoor conservation also as well. Reduce leaks, mainly Ciudad Juárez, is also very expensive because due to all infrastructure that the city has, and they have to make a lot of replacement on the base water distribution lines for potable water to the city. And also to import water from long distances like aqueductos from other watersheds will be also very expensive. So there were no real consensus or direction to follow up based on their responses. So the best options were dependent on getting a clear sense. That means that we should explain a bit more on the timeline goal. That means that we were also addressing how long they wanted to expand the life on the aquifer, and also to reduce the distribution of costs and costs on these different actions. So the discussion of the distribution of sharing of costs, Ciudad Juárez could not reduce more than 50% by itself. That means that the water utilities were not able to reduce pumping more than 50%. So that means that funding and some cost sharing between the US and Mexico should be done by both countries. So we did not consider the many supply gains and water saving measurements that might be cheaper in Mexico. So there were no single consensus on who should pay for reduction and supplying the demands on the water for both cities. So some of the key findings, again, there was significant convergence on the overall goal of prolonging the life of the aquifer. That means that all participants wanted to extend the life of the aquifer. That was an understanding, a pretty bottom line understanding of everybody wants to conserve water, but there's someone has to pay for that action. So there was a broad confidence on the model. That's also important to understand that they did accept our numbers based on what they knew and based on what they understood about the aquifer, and also that the 31-year depletion time frame is also very realistic according to what they knew. And I just wanted you to remind you that we had some representative from the water agencies, so they were okay with the numbers. So participants found it to be a reasonable, believable scenario. So that's how we use the system to understand or to explain them the approximation on the game. There was an agreement that the water pollution depletion is a shared binational issue. This is important because nobody was thinking individually or very on their own side. So they understood that this is going to be a binational approach to solving the water demands on the region in the near future. Next slide, please. So they did select from the 7 options that we gave them the possibility to implement with appropriate funding and support. So the 50-year depletion horizon was the main frame that they were discussing or they were considering. In the end, no definite decisions were taken, but the process of having them thinking about how to collaborate binationally, that was a very positive result. That means that people are willing to speak within themselves and to keep exchanging information and exchanging ideas under an informal scenario or process. So the challenge was to turn these goals and realizations into real target. That is, how should we move forward our agenda and make this serious game approximation a serious exercise? And that's pretty much what we want to understand today based on the opinions of the experts. So a sense of mutual engagement and commitment was palpable. Was a sense that we felt there in between participants. I think that's the last slide, Bill.
Yes.
I don't know, Alex, if you want to add anything else or if you have the time to do that. Thank you.
Okay,
That's very good. Thank you, Alfredo.
Thank you very much to Dr. Mayer and Dr. Granados. They covered a lot of ground, a lot of information. We have invited 4 experts to respond to this presentation. We've chosen 2 experts from Mexico and 2 experts from the United States as a panel to respond briefly. And we chose them not only for their expertise, their technical expertise, but for their experience. All 4 of these panelists have actual experience related to these important issues that we've been talking about. So I'm going to introduce all 4 of them. We've asked them just each one to take just 6 minutes to respond briefly to what we have presented, and then we're going to open it up for everyone to comment or to ask questions. So we have first Dr. Carlos Alatorre from Juarez. He is a professor of geoinformatics at UACJ and now currently the director of the Rio Bravo Basin within Conagua. And his research interests are in geo-environmental processes and global change, water and environmental sciences, and water administration and public policies. And then we have also Dr. Oscar Ibanez, who's the executive director of the Central Board of Water and Sanitation in Chihuahua. He's also a professor at UACJ, and he has more than 30 years of experience as a consultant in geotechnics, environmental engineering, and public policies in Mexico, United States, and Canada. And we have also from the United States, Dr. Gabriel Eckstein, who is a professor of law and director of the Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Systems Law Program at Texas A&M Law School in Fort Worth, Texas. He's an expert advisor and consultant on US and international and environmental and water law issues. His research focuses on natural resources and environmental issues at both the national and international levels. And we have Mr. Ed Drusina, who's a professional engineer and formerly the US Commissioner for IBWC in El Paso. While he was commissioner, he led the US team in developing international agreements between the US and Mexico to better manage the waters of the Colorado River during drought conditions, and developed a wide range of international agreements with Mexico involving water, wastewater, and boundary matters. So as I said, we have 4 experts here. I'm going to give each one just a few minutes to briefly respond. So we'll start with Carlos, Dr. Alatorre. Go ahead.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenos días a todos. Es un placer estar aquí. Agradezco la invitación. Y pues bueno, prácticamente estrenándome como el director general del organismo de Cuenca del Río Bravo, la parte federal que administra y ejerce las políticas públicas en cuanto a la administración del agua a lo largo y ancho de todo el Río Bravo. Ahorita, viendo los perfiles de los compañeros, indudablemente vemos a un compañero que formó parte de la SILA. Me gustaría primero comenzar que, si bien, ¿cómo podríamos enmarcar una serie de acciones o operativizar esta serie de estudios que se están haciendo de forma binacional entre universidades de ambos países? No me gustaría dejar pasar por alto desde que hay un acta que nos remite al año de 1970, que es el acta 242, donde se puso las reglas en que se debería operar estos programas binacionales para la correcta administración de los acuíferos transfronterizos que hay entre Estados Unidos y México. Hay que decir que en esta serie de acciones, pues la SILA como tal, asumió la rectoría en el sentido de que iba a ser la instancia que se encargaría de hacer las gestiones pertinentes para conseguir los recursos de ambos países. También iba a ser la instancia que iba a concentrar la información que se generara en todos los programas, desde la caracterización y el monitoreo que debe de haber de estos acuíferos binacionales. Pues de 1970 a la fecha, pues hay que decir que ha sido relativamente poco lo que se ha hecho, tanto de la parte mexicana como de la parte estadounidense, en este ámbito o en este marco legal que se estableció desde el año 1970. Indudablemente, tanto con agua y también la SILA, hay que decir, pues se ha enfocado precisamente a este acuífero que es objeto de nuestro estudio, al acuífero Bolsón del Hueco. Pero indudablemente, por ejemplo, los resultados que nos muestran en este proyecto, pues ha sido una iniciativa de las universidades tanto de Texas, Nuevo México y de la parte de Chihuahua. Sin embargo, creo que este proyecto en particular puede ser la punta de lanza donde se dé de nueva cuenta la pauta a seguir para volver a reunir a las autoridades binacionales, tanto a Conagua, tanto a la Junta Central de Aguas de Chihuahua, así como las demás instancias de los otros países. No podemos pasar de largo que tenemos que meter todos estos estudios y nuestros resultados en estas investigaciones en el marco legal que ayude a operativizar todas estas acciones. Indudablemente vamos un muy buen camino. En lo particular, participé en este proyecto por invitación del doctor Alfredo Granado. Formamos parte del grupo de investigadores del lado mexicano. Entonces, en términos generales, eso indudablemente yo creo que asumo el compromiso de suerte que hay que decir que esta oportunidad que me da el gobierno federal de tomar las riendas o tomar el control de toda esta región hidrológica, me comprometo en la medida de las posibilidades, construir entre todos cuál es el camino a seguir, cuáles son las instancias que deberían estar involucradas, incluso del lado mexicano, dado que la cuenca del río Bravo entra en una región de seguridad nacional. La SILA pertenece a la Secretaría de Relaciones Exteriores de México. Podríamos crear un grupo de trabajo donde mostráramos estos resultados y las probables acciones que requeríamos para subirlas al comité, a la SILA, ¿no? Tanto del lado mexicano como americano. Entonces, hay que decir que esta es una gran oportunidad. Conozco el proyecto desde el año 2015 y pues por lo pronto es lo que quisiera decir aquí y luego retomar otros aspectos que indudablemente ayudarán a enmarcar esta necesidad, porque no solamente es el acuífero del Bolsón del Hueco, tenemos otros muchos acuíferos que no son reconocidos ni por Estados Unidos ni por México, y que indudablemente el cambio climático va a hacer que dependamos más de estas fuentes tan importantes y que son compartidas para ambas naciones. Muchas gracias. Ahorita espero otro turno, si les parece.
Okay, thank you very much, Carlos. Next, Dr. Oscar Ibanez. Oscar?
Sí, muy bien, buenas tardes a todos. Bueno, mira, es evidente que este problema se tiene que atender desde una perspectiva binacional. Yo creo que de eso no, a nadie le queda duda. El cómo se ha ido atendiendo, bueno, y además tenemos una instancia binacional formal, que es la Comisión Internacional de Límites y Aguas, como lo comentó Luis Carlos. El acta 242 y luego después la 289 y luego el acuerdo de los ingenieros principales del 2009 son ya las actividades específicas que se han desarrollado para tratar de abordar este tema de manera formal, de manera binacional, digámoslo así, ¿no? Con esa formalidad. Algo se avanzó y sin embargo, en paralelo también ha habido otros esfuerzos de carácter informal. Yo creo que todos los que estamos aquí recordamos el ejercicio que tuvimos del Paso del Norte Water Task Force, que fue más o menos de 1999 al 2009, más o menos en ese periodo, que donde se hicieron varias cosas. Ahorita que estaba viendo las gráficas del estudio, pues yo creo que los primeros datos de carácter binacional del Paso del Norte los generó este Task Force. Y eso fue un grupo hasta cierto punto informal que involucraba ciertamente a las autoridades del SILA, pero también a los operadores tanto de usuarios de riego como usuarios de uso público urbano, algunos académicos y gente de la comunidad. Ahí salieron cosas interesantes. Recuerdo, por ejemplo, el mapa binacional que se generó de los pozos, de la explotación de pozos, el mapeo que se hizo del acuífero, en fin, yo creo que se avanzó y subrayo de que fueron esfuerzos concurrentes. Esto se dio de una manera más informal, con una estructura un poquito más suelta, pero que permitió una colaboración más explícita. Y aquí quiero llamar la atención sobre la diferencia fundamental de la cooperación binacional. La cooperación binacional formal que tiene que pasar por México y Ciudad de México y Washington tiene unas líneas muy gruesas de donde creo yo que no se puede salir. Sin embargo, la cooperación local, como los esfuerzos de este proyecto que nos tiene aquí reunidos o lo que hizo el Paso Water Task Force, eso da mucha más flexibilidad y libertad para intercambio y discusión y avance de algunos proyectos. Entonces, y a mí me parece que son esfuerzos complementarios. Yo creo que no hay que perder de vista que se necesitan las dos cosas. Los esfuerzos locales, por otra parte, activan de manera explícita los esfuerzos locales en cada uno de los países, porque cuando hablamos de cooperación binacional, tenemos que asumir que hay algo que está haciendo un lado de la frontera y algo que está haciendo el otro lado de la frontera. De tal manera de que la cooperación se da de cosas que se están haciendo, no por iniciativa de uno o de otro lado. Y entonces, detonar digamos, la actividad local de los actores locales es muy importante para que realmente haya una cooperación binacional efectiva. Cuando la cooperación binacional se da solo en las esferas federales formales, la realidad es de que no es muy efectiva. Y cuando subrayo esto de que no es muy efectiva, no quiere decir que no sirva, simplemente requiere pues de este otro esfuerzo complementario de la base de los actores locales. Por ejemplo, algunas de las cosas que se plantean aquí en el portafolio, tanto para Ciudad Juárez como para El Paso, y todos sabemos que Las Cruces o Doña Ana debe estar involucrado por el tema del volumen que hay en la mesilla y que usa tanto Juárez como El Paso, pero también que hay una parte que está usada para cuestiones de riego en el lado de Nuevo México. si no se detonan, para que los actores empiecen a realmente operar cosas, no los puede hacer que opere el SILA o la CONAGUA o el US Bureau of Reclamation. Tienen que ser los actores locales los que tomen esos acuerdos. Entonces, el modelo que creo yo que debemos de continuar es un modelo complementario entre cooperación binacional formal y una cooperación binacional más flexible, local, de actores locales, que sea lo que le dé sustento a los avances que puedan darse en el ámbito federal. Hasta ahí lo dejaría.
Okay, thank you very much. So moving now to the two panel members who are from the United States. First, Dr. Gabriel Eckstein.
Thank you, Bill. So I want to build on something that Dr. Ibanez was talking about, which is this local perspective, because I think this is absolutely critical. As he said, we do have a formal structure. We do have a formal structure that is, at that national to national level. But at the same time, it is the locals who are the ones who are going to be living the water situation. And there has to be some kind of mechanism to incorporate the local stakeholders into the formal process. So while we do have a formal process, it really needs to be formal but local. And so I would go a step further than what my colleague was just saying, that those local institutions, the local stakeholders, they have to be incorporated into that formal process so that they have a stake and they have a say at the table. We saw this done to some extent with Medits, was it 318, 319 on the Colorado River. And I think we need something very similar in this context, where we bring in folks who are very involved with the process and have a stake in the outcome. Now, I think there's been some question about, what's the way forward? Should we establish a commission? Should we establish a task force? And so on. I'm not as concerned about, what it is that we create as much as who's involved in it. And again, this goes back to the issue of that local involvement. So whether it's a commission or a task force or a forum or some other mechanism that is assigned this task, it's the people who are assigned to be involved in this is what's critical. But part of that is also, what exactly are they being assigned? Are they being assigned to study the situation? Are they being assigned to come up with potential solutions? I think if they are given the task of doing more than just research, of actually coming up with potential solutions, clearly this is going to have to go through IBWC and CELA, but if this is coming from sort of a bottom-up approach in terms of how can we resolve the situation, then I think that's going to be more productive. And I should have prefaced my comments by saying that the situation, I don't think anybody's surprised. We knew that the Hueco Bolson was being depleted. We certainly know it back in the 90s from prior studies, but this more recent study, evidences that it's continuing to be depleted. Maybe not at the same rates, but there is going to be a breaking point, and we need to do something about it. One last point that I wanted to throw out in terms of management mechanism or governance mechanism, and maybe this is part of the task that whatever this, the forum or committee or commission will undertake to consider, is what actions will we take or will recommend as the potential solutions. People have mentioned conservation, mentioned recycling, reuse, and so on. But I think we need to think a little bit grander about the problem. And I'm going to propose something that might be a little radical, if only to present a straw man from which we can start a starting position. Unitization. What about considering the Hueco Bolson as a single unit, having a governance body making decisions as a body on how to manage and allocate the aquifer. Right now, we have two sides, the water utilities on both sides making these decisions. They get together, they share data, but they do things separately, and trying to make decisions about how much to decrease on one side or the other or by certain actors, it gets complicated. But if this is done in one body that has that authority to make decisions for the entire aquifer, yeah, there will be fights, I'm sure. But I'm wondering if this might be a starting point for a discussion for the more sustainable management. Somebody talked about sustainability in the comments, but for the more sustainable management of this aquifer, where it's managed as a single body, but of course, deciding, well, pumping in certain locations under certain conditions at certain rates, but considering the entire body as one unit, and in that way, sort of managing the depletion over a certain time horizon, and in that way deciding, well, do we want the time horizon to be 30 years, 50 years, 80 years, or whatever else it may be. So this is just something that I want to just throw out, at least for conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Last, we have Mr. Ed Drusina.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Sam, Rosario. It's a beautiful day here in El Paso and Ciudad Juarez. I'm looking out the window. It's a perfect day to be outside. Fortunately, we're still inside and protecting ourselves from COVID, but nonetheless, it is a beautiful day here. I've had a keen interest in the water issues here in El Paso, Ciudad Juarez region for many years. We certainly hit a high point when I was invited to be on this panel, but also to serve as a commissioner for the IBWC. So thanks to everyone for giving me this opportunity. We were given 3 questions to kind of focus in on. First one is, binational action called for, and what is the best form for this action to take? As was noted in the presentation that we started off with, the Huecable Zone is a major source of water for the city of El Paso, Ciudad Juarez, and this region. It's being depleted at an unsustainable rate. So undoubtedly, yes, binational action is absolutely necessary, and it's now that we need to take that action. We share this one water source, and the El Paso and Ciudad Juarez pumping is depleting at a rate that will impact our children. Let me repeat that. It's going to impact our children, not 1 or 2 generations down the road, but to our children today, if we don't take aggressive steps now to better manage the amount of water that is being pumped. The social and economic futures of both Mexico and the United States in these 2 cities will be dramatically impacted. Formal and informal actions need certainly to be taking place now. Informally, we need to spread the information that has been collected by the Serious Games Workshop and in other studies that have taken place. However, we need to first get organized and develop a binational leadership group that is charged with developing the strategy moving forward. The binational group, I think, needs to have resources, so they need to have members that are influential and in positions of authority. This group must chart the course that both countries agree upon that will result in significantly reducing the withdrawal from the Huecable Zone. The second question was, what solutions would you consider most effective and how can the cost be covered? In order to come up with solutions, we must first agree on the problem. All of us in both countries that are responsible for studying, delivering, or using this water must formally agree to the problem. Then and only then, together, we can begin to work on how we should move forward. If we are united, we can influence public and private interests to join us in developing solutions. There are several potential technical and financial supporters. One has been the EPA. Since 1983, the La Paz Agreement between the United States and Mexico, the EPA has provided funding that is directed at correcting the environmental problems that are occurring along the US-Mexico border. The EPA's Border 2020 program is due for an update if it hasn't already been updated, but it should be well on its way in being updated. We need to gain support from local, state, and federal leaders. The Department of Interior is another potential supporter, although it is strictly domestic. And then, of course, the North American Development Bank that has created the conjunction with NAFTA is at another potential source of financial support. They have funded millions of dollars of improvements in Mexico and in the United States, and they've provided a considerable improvement to the water quality of many border communities. The final question that we were given was, what is the best immediate response? What is the way forward? I believe a serious problem, such as I mentioned earlier, requires the creation of a binational group, a binational task force that is charged with taking the leadership role in developing solutions that address ways that will extend the life of the Hueco Bolson. The objective is clear. We need to find a way to reduce the rate of extraction from the Hueco that is fair to all parties. In my closing, let me just mention that while I was at the International Boundary Water Commission, Mexico and the United States were highly successful in resolving very serious drought concerns that impacted millions of people that depended on the Colorado River system. That process started with both countries working together, building trust. We share everything, and we need to do that here. Only in this way can you build a platform in which to build water conservation measures that serve to prevent the depletion of the Bolson. Some would say that we are actually ahead of the game here in El Paso and Ciudad Juarez, since we have already applied much of the science and engineering, but we all realize that more study may be needed. I encourage you to look at the IBWC's website and look at minutes 316, 17, 18, 19, 22, and 23. Each one was a baby step that walked us to the ultimate objective of extending the life of the waters of the Colorado River during drought conditions, where the 40 million people and a huge percentage of our domestic product depend upon. We need to get that process moving forward here and now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to all of the panel members. Comments were very insightful, and you have put some interesting challenges on the table for discussion. Thank you again also to the presenters who presented the research results for the insightful presentation. So we're right on time, or we're right on schedule, according to the time allotments that we had made for this activity. But now it's time that we can take questions, comments from the audience. We're going to ask you to write your comments, please, in the chat box, and we'll try to take as many questions or comments as we can. So please write your questions in the chat box, and Sam.
Bill, if you check your script, Bill, they are already there.
Okay, I'm going there right now. So first one that I see here is from Randall Henson. And the question is there any plan to update the USGS Haywood-Yager model to get at more detailed analysis of mitigation and adaptation scenarios? So I don't know, maybe Alex, could you answer that?
Yeah, I'll try. I understand that Saurav Kumar, who I think is on the call here today, and his colleagues at Texas A&M AgriLife are planning to upgrade and update the Haywood-Yager model. And I would agree it would be great to have a more sophisticated model than the simple one compartment model that we're using as we start to move into trying to make more decisions, more detailed decisions about how to extend the life of the aquifer.
Okay. All right, thank you. Next question is from Ruben Chavez. The full depletion time refers only to fresh water. What about an estimate of the brackish water stored in the aquifer, and let's see, the desalted water volume from El Paso is brackish or recycled water from the city. I didn't quite understand that. But what about Alex? Any estimates on how much brackish water there is?
I'm not going to quote numbers off the top of my head, but I think the amount of brackish water that's remaining is far in excess of the fresh water that's remaining. Our focus was only on the fresh water, but I think, again, a more extensive study should address the sustainability of the brackish portion of the aquifer, how much is left. And of course, we all know that desalination is not free. It's very costly. So we also have to consider that.
Okay.
There's also an option for consulting the work that John Hawley has done, and he has talked about the brackish availability and volume on the region. So that might be an interesting information that you want to check out.
Okay, thank you. Also, is there any estimate of the groundwater flow that crosses the border for the different scenarios? So is the volume significant with respect to the overall balance from each country? So either Alex or Alfredo, you want to address the groundwater movement across the border?
Alfredo, you want to take that?
Well, I will start. Thank you. There's always been the cones of depression that are dominated by excess pumping from the Juarez area. So, and also by physically settings, water is moving from north to south into the Mexican region. And that depends on the depth of the aquifer and the volume that is being pumped from the region. So right now, the cones of depression are into Mexico based on the hydraulic conditions in the system.
Okay. And then we have a couple of comments here that are related to the comments by the panelists. The comment says they're in complete agreement with Dr. Ibanez and Dr. Eckstein that local action will be more effective and has to be the way to go. We cannot depend on the central or federal government authorities. And finally, the damages and benefits will be suffered by the local population. So why shouldn't they also come up with the solution? So I don't know, either Dr. Ibanez or Dr. Eckstein, do you want to follow up with any other comment about that? I think it's a very good point that the local people are going to be the ones who either suffer the damages, as it says, or reap the benefits. So why shouldn't they be the ones to come up with the solution?
I guess I'll just reiterate. Bueno, perdón, voy a hablar en español. Yo creo que lo que creo, perdón, estoy cambiándome de canal. Lo que creo que debería de enfatizar nada más es que son esfuerzos complementarios. O sea, si realmente queremos hablar de una cooperación binacional, no podemos descartar los mecanismos formales. Lo que sí está claro es que si no hay estos otros mecanismos informales, el proceso puede ser muy lento y poco eficiente. Yo estimo pues que deben de ser las dos de manera concurrente.
Okay. Dr. Eckstein, you want to add
Bill,
to that?
Bill, if I can add a comment to
Sure.
that point.
Sure.
And I certainly agree, local investment and participation is extremely important, but the problem is so huge and the growth in both cities is it's enormous. The impact is being caused from national interest in these areas. The amount of growth is certainly connected to the amount of economic boom that's occurred in each of our countries. So I think you need to have local investment, local participation, but you do need state and federal knowledge of this and working with those individuals in Conagua, Semarnat, Department of Interior, Bureau of Reclamation, having them vested in this solution will go a long ways.
Okay, thank you. All right, next question from Omar Martinez.
¿Puedo intervenir? Disculpen. Nomás una pregunta.
What was aquifer recharge? Sure, yes, go ahead.
Ok, gracias. Bueno, en términos generales yo creo que hay consenso, ¿no? Indudablemente el empoderamiento de las comunidades locales, indudablemente es lo que detonará, ¿no? Que los mecanismos institucionales, incluso locales y también en otros órdenes de institucionales se activen indudablemente. Prueba de ello es que indudablemente también quedó en papel, quedó en archivo muerto. En el año del 2006, Estados Unidos aprobó una ley, la 109-448, donde el gobierno de Estados Unidos se comprometía a echar a andar esta maquinaria para el estudio de los acuíferos transfronterizos. Incluso Estados Unidos creó una ley pública donde se comprometía a financiar tanto del lado mexicano como el estadounidense este tipo de proyectos, acciones que permitan prolongar en el tiempo la sustentabilidad del recurso hídrico. Pero yo creo que indudablemente del lado mexicano también hay que crear una corresponsabilidad. Es decir, yo creo que sí es necesario, estoy de acuerdo al escuchar a todos los panelistas en términos general, pero sí me quedo con lo que menciona, hacer énfasis con lo que muy bien acotó Oscar Ibáñez. O sea, es imposible echar a un lado las demás instancias que son las que realmente operativizan las políticas públicas, financiamiento, etcétera, etcétera, las que realmente, ¿no? Pero indudablemente el empoderamiento local es importante. Gracias.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. We have a comment here from Rosario Sanchez, who says, we as scientists always want more data. How much more data would we need in order to develop strategies to stop depletion? Or is it more a matter of decision-making and political will? What are your thoughts on Dr. Eckstein's proposal about the unitization of the aquifer, and is that feasible? So there's several parts there. I don't know. Maybe Dr. Eckstein, would you like to take a stab at commenting on that? So she's asking both about, is it that we need more research, or is it more a lack of political will? And then maybe comment a little bit more on your proposal about how it could actually be implemented.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. So on the issue of data, certainly we could always use more data. Absolutely, there's no question about that. But at some point, decisions have to be made. And there's a difference between policy making and decision making. Policy making really is making those decisions based on the data that is available. And at some point, you have to make a policy decision. You know, when you get data from scientists, they tell you how much water you have or where it's flowing and the quality, and they will project into the future. But they're not going to tell you exactly, you know, who can use it and how much they should use, and how much we should be depleting or not depleting, or how much recharge. Those are policy decisions, and those policy decisions have to be made, at a political level. But I also want to emphasize that that political level, going back to what's been said before, has to integrate local decision makers and local users and local stakeholders. Absolutely, yes, involve folks from the different environmental agencies and water agencies at the federal government, at the state governments, and so on. But it has to, those decisions are going to impact the local communities. And so the locals need to help make that decision based on the available data. It'd be great to have more data, but at some point decisions have to be made. If you look at the Texas Water Plan, for example, which is sort of this bottom-up approach, there were decisions made 30 years ago and 20 years ago based on the data that was available at that time. And those decisions are modified every 5 years, every 10 years based on new information. And I think this is something that can be done in a similar way with a decision on the Hueco Bolson and really any other water resource that US and Mexico shares. We don't have to wait until we have enough data. We may never have enough data. So that's one thing I wanted to say. On the unitization idea, again, I'm just throwing this out as an idea for discussion. Ideally, yes, I think it is an ideal matter. I think we could manage the aquifer as one unit, have a single body making decisions in terms of, okay, from that well, we will pump X amount. From this well, we will pump Y amount. Over here, we'll do recharge. Over here, and the cost sharing. Well, we will do cost sharing based on this formula, and so on. That would be an ideal situation. And in fact, you have something similar to this with the Genovese aquifer between Switzerland and France. That was done on a local basis over an aquifer that crosses the border. And there's a local commission that has effectively unitized that aquifer, and they decide as a unit extraction and recharge, and there's cost sharing and so on. Could we achieve the same thing here between US and Mexico? It's possible. I don't know. The politics could always get in the way, but at least let's start from that presumption that we might be able to do it. How would we do it? What would be the priorities? What would be important? How would we actually start making management decision and allocation decision and pumping decision and recharge decision and cost allocation decision? Maybe we won't be able to achieve it, but at least we will get closer to a situation where we know what the other side is thinking and wants and desires and what they might be willing to give up, which I think is really, really important here for the purpose of achieving cooperation.
Very good. Would one of the other speakers or one of the other panelists also like to respond about his idea on unitization of the aquifer? Anybody else want to comment?
I'll just comment and say I'm all for it.
And I'll ditto that. All for unitization. We're all trying to pull together, but the advantage that we have in the El Paso Ciudad Juarez area is that we know each other very well, and I think we have a great relationship. We have a cooperative atmosphere that's already been built. So yes, locally we can pull a team together that can address it, as Dr. Eckstein mentioned. But we still will need big dollars to resolve some of the big problems that occur on both sides of the border. And that cannot necessarily be handled by local government. That's going to take a lot higher level support.
Yeah.
Can I jump in here real quick?
Sure.
Because this is something that I want to build on what Commissioner Brusino was saying, and also something that was Mario Lopez just said in the comments about this local binational working group or forum or whatever it is, but it has to be formalized under SILA and IBWC. I agree. We need the formality of IBWC and SILA, but it has to be locally oriented, integrating the federal and the states. But so formal but local. I don't know how else to describe it, but that's what I would envision as having the best chance of success.
And I will add one additional comment, and that is Conagua in Mexico, as I understand, manages surface and groundwater. In the United States, the IBWC is charged with surface water. Groundwater, yes, we have participated, the United States with the IBWC has participated in organizing aquifer analysis, but they do not have a direct responsibility for it. So that may be a step that needs to be taken.
Okay. We have a question from Stephanie Palladino. She said in the discussions, did the options for implementing measures or interventions in phases come up so that it's many of these strategies that were talked about in our presentation, she's asking they don't have to, or she's saying they don't have to be either or, but can some of these things be done in different stages or phases in combination with each other? So either Alex or Alfredo, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I think that it's important to understand that I think that what Gabriel pointed out, the baby steps to move forward in the binational agenda to manage the transboundary aquifer systems. And I want to get back a little bit on some of the answers that we got in some of the questions you put in there, that participants put in there in regards to data availability. And that addresses, again, back to this question, because it's not only to have the available data, it's also the scale, it's also the timing. It's a real-time measurement that we need to have, which we don't. And we also have the unit problems and the classification problems and stuff like that. So everything that has to be done, it has to be, hydrology is a real-time process to understand. And it's not only the available data, because eventually, if you have the data, it will be after 2 or 5 years, and then the solution will not be anymore, applicable. So I think that yes, it's a step by step to move forward, but we need to have an overall view on how to manage the binational system.
Okay, good. Okay, we have a question from Maru, and who is with COLEF. How were you able to involve all the social stakeholders from both sides of the border, Mexico and the United States, for this participatory process? And what are the governmental institutions that also participated?
Bill, Joe has his hand raised.
Okay, I can't right now. I'm sorry, I can't see the people. I can only see the questions. So if you'd like to make a comment, go ahead.
Yes. With respect to turn off the sound. With respect to
Joe, we can't hear you.
Implementing
Josh, just one favor. Please go to the.
With respect to implementing it in phases.
Joe, hold on.
Joe, we cannot hear you.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Yes, I think there
was Joe.
Is my sound
English
back?
Channel.
I think.
Please select the English channel.
Select the English channel. Go to interpretation.
You want me to select the English channel? Okay.
You're good now.
I would do Spanish. Very good. Yes. So I think with respect to implementing it in phases, that the serious games model struggled with even choosing among options, different costs and volumes for making these, implementing these decisions. Now, it might have worked better if it was a sit-down game for an entire day or 2 days in a room with movable pieces or something like that. And that may have been a limitation of doing the event serious game in little pieces on Zoom. But it was hard to get people to really focus on the details of implementation, and that may have been a bridge too far. Clearly, implementing these things would need to be implemented in phases. For example, we just said, here's this volume, here's this cost, here's desalination. Well, it actually takes a long time to bring a desalination plant online. So I think that's correct. I do want to say with respect to another thing that came from the serious game that's a piece of information worth considering is that the local, as important as having a local dialogue and local support is to this process, and I'm in complete agreement with that. All of the commentators brought that up. The big funding, the big capital funding for making these changes needs to come from levels of government that have large amounts of capital funding. Unless you give these local organizations the ability to implement many billions of dollars of bonds. And that can sort of occur in the United States. It's a challenge. It's very difficult in Mexico. Then I think we do need to bring in higher levels of government to fund decisions that may be, the decisions may need to be local and regional, but the funding will need to be from a higher level. And that is not just, you know, my opinion. That was clearly brought out in the game, where, you know, we start talking about what Sierra Juarez can do to reduce its pumping, which is in the current day, not in the past, but in the current day, the biggest stressor on the Hueco-Bolson. But quickly it turned around to saying, how can we support Sierra Juarez in reducing its pumping? Because otherwise it's an enormous burden on a city which has many needs and burdens. So I think that that's something that everybody in the game respected and started to work with in the discussion.
Okay, and since you were already talking, the question was about how we engage stakeholders. You want to just comment about that? How did we engage stakeholders from both sides of the border in the serious games activity?
If Joe's not going to answer that, I'll go ahead.
Oh, okay. I wasn't know where that was.
Yeah. Go ahead, Alex.
Going.
Go
yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, Alex.
Well, first of all, I think with our work over the last several years, we have built up quite a good network of stakeholders and interested people from both sides of the border. So we relied on our past connections. You know, we have on the team that developed the serious games, Dr. Granados Olivas, who is extremely well connected and networked with regard to water resources professionals. And so we intentionally set out to have a participants that were evenly split between US and Mexico, and we achieved that. So we sent out invitations, and then if we didn't hear anything, we followed up. And again, I would credit Alfredo with you know, really pursuing people on the Mexican side to make sure that we did have that equal participation.
Okay, well, we're out of time. I wish we had another hour to talk. There's several more questions been posted, and the discussion is going very well, but I think we need to...
I think that Oscar raised his hand. I don't know if you want to...
Well, if there's no time, there's no time.
Well, we can give you the last word. So we'll let you have the last word.
Well, thank you, Will. Well, I keep thinking about how to move forward, and I guess right now the small or large efforts that have been done are being done individually. Like you guys, you have this project. It's been what now, 5-6 years that you're working out with this thing, and I already pointed out the work that was done under the Paso del Norte Water Task Force, and the formal governance structure or legal structure that we have on the region for these type of issues won't allow us to set out goals and to do a plan with the specific goals. We don't have that kind of framework right now in place. So we need to work around that and figure out probably a series of meetings that just update this general information, and all the individual participants will do their part until we figure out a formal framework to make a more institutional follow-up of these things. I mean, you have the 5-year Texas plan. On New Mexico, there's also a 20-year plan. Chihuahua, we already have the 2040 plan, but they're not specific on goals at the local level. And and there's not a real interaction with irrigation users and public use users to come up with goals that work together or that work well for everyone. So right now, if we don't focus on having that framework, that instrument, well, we'll just have to deal with the individual efforts and these efforts that will remind us the looming crisis, and that's about it. I mean, that's the way I see it right now. I mean, it's kind of a sad, but it's also a practical approach that we need to undertake.
Okay, I think that's probably a good place to end. I want to say thank you again to the speakers who shared the research, to the panelists who commented, and for all of you who you were very engaged with your questions and your comments. And I'm going to now turn it back over to Rosario and say one more time, thank you to Rosario and Sam for hosting this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you to all the speakers, the panelists. It was a great event. And we learned a lot in a very, just, 1 hour and a half, we learned a lot of the walkable zone. A lot of questions in the air, but I think we have stuff, really good stuff there on the table that we can, look forward to it and keep moving towards that direction of how, whatever we call it, as Gabriel said, we have something to start. In small steps, and this is a good one. So thank you to the audience. Thank you to actually a very good audience through the whole time. And again, if you are interested and you want to share your cooperation efforts along the border, please contact us. We're going to post that information, and I'm going to pass it to Sam. Do you want to say final words before we close it? Sam is in the Spanish world right now, I guess. Welcome back.
Sí, solo para recordarles que, bueno, este es un evento que Bill, Alex y otros nos propusieron, y aquí la invitación es para todos, que nos puedan, que se animen, que nos digan si el evento en el que ustedes están pensando es acorde a los valores, a los objetivos que tenemos en el foro. Por favor, avísenos y estaremos muy, muy contentos de pues tener un evento como estos, de host an event.
Muchas gracias.
Take a look at the link that I put it in there, which is just, and you can register online any event. Thanks, everyone. Muchas gracias.
Again, thank you. Thank you, Bill, Oscar, Alfredo, Doctora Latorre, Alex, Gabriel, Commissioner Drusina, all the team from the forum, of course, as always, thank you. And thank you for the trust. And we will be here pretty soon. The anniversary is coming, so wait for us. We'll have more announcements coming up.
Thank you very much, Rosario. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rosario.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
it was
everyone.
great seeing you guys. Great seeing
Gracias
you.
a todos.
Bye,
Un abrazo.
everyone.
Cuídense.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Thanks,
We hope to
everyone.
see you soon in person, hopefully.
Como decía Rosario,
Again.
para los que están aquí, dentro de poco tendremos el primer aniversario del foro permanente.
Josh, I didn't
Están
say
todos
goodbye.
invitados. Vamos a
Gilbert.
platicar lo que hemos hecho, lo que pensamos hacer y bueno, pues siempre la participación de todos. Muchas, muchas gracias. Ya vamos para un año y un pastelito de primer cumpleaños. Gracias.
Thank you.
Adiós, gracias.
Thank you, guys.
Doctor Chávez, gracias. Como siempre.
Hasta luego.
Colega Morales, todos.
Hasta luego, Rosario.
Rosario.
Coleta, muchas gracias por andar por aquí. Felipe, muchas gracias. Raúl. Liliana, mira nomás, por aquí anda Liliana. Gracias.
Chicos guapos,
Ofelia.
saludos y bendiciones.
Carla, muchas gracias. Rubén, como siempre, un gusto. Gracias por tus comentarios. Felipe.
Buenas
bueno
tardes
que
a todos.
te
Joel,
reúnen
un
por acá.
abrazo.
Ahí estamos.
Gracias.
Saludos a todos por allá.
Saludos, Rosario.
Mario,
Rosario, hasta luego.
Felipe, Eliana, Julieta, los que podemos ver por aquí.
Sí. Gracias a todos. Nos vemos, Julieta. Gracias.
Deberíamos inventar abrazos virtuales.
Ay, sí.
Sam, stop the YouTube. Yes,
Oh,
Sam,
sí.
stop the
Sí, sí,
YouTube.
sí.